It will take a few minutes for everybody to be added to the. Yeah, we're getting up to 12. It's going up and up now. So.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just letting everybody in, and we will be starting in one moment.
I think, Justine, I may have to go into backstage to change Mary Jo's
Oh, she's
role.
in right now, so you don't have to go into backstage. You can just go right here and promote to panelist.
Yeah, I already did that.
Oh, now I can, I think.
Yeah, I did that, so great, that worked.
So Mary Jo, we don't see you on the screen yet. Is that on your side or our side?
No, it's just it forces you to rejoin, so I'm here now.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Shall we get started then?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a very illustrious speaker today, which I'm excited about. I am Justine Wheeler, part of the Statistics and Evaluation Committee, and with me is Christine Brown, who is the co-organizer of this series, Focus on Impact. And Christine is going to give us a land acknowledgement, and then Dr. Mary Jo Rominack is going to introduce us to our speaker. Mary Jo is also a member of Statistics and Evaluation Committee or section, and she is our treasurer and maybe co-chair, but I can't remember. All right. So, Christine, first the land acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you. So I work at the University of Alberta, and Justine and Mary Jo work at the University of Calgary, so I'll be recognizing both of those places. So the University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the history, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. The University of Calgary, located in the heart of southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina First Nation, and Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6.
All right, thank you very much. Now I've done something. This seems to have gone the wrong way for the slide, so I'm going to fix them back up. But before I do that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mary Jo Rominack to introduce our speaker today.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Rominack, and as Justine had mentioned, I'm secretary of the section, and I am also going to start by also bringing greetings from our chair of the section, Bella Gerlich, who was intending to be here today, but has unfortunately no internet and seems very little connectivity to anything. So she sends her regrets, but also wishes us well for another great session, and is disappointed she's going to miss it. I am very excited to introduce our speaker. I have been a long-time admirer of her work and the timely, excellent, really relevant material that is produced under her purview. And so with that, I want to welcome Dr. Lynn Silipini Connaway, Executive Director of Research at OCLC. Dr. Connaway is an award-winning researcher, academic, and leader in the field of information and library sciences. Amongst her many achievements, she's the 2023 Follett Chair at Dominican University School of Information Studies, and she has presented at numerous international and national conferences. And I would just mention a couple of them because I know we have such a global audience. She was the 2014 visiting scholar at the University of Copenhagen, 2009 visiting researcher at the University of Sheffield, and an excellence chair at the Universidad Carlos III in Madrid, Spain. So lots of international, I'm sure many of you would recognize her for her work all over. She is also the author of many publications, including the co-author, the 6th and 7th editions of Research Methods in Library and Information Science. Dr. Connaway's current responsibilities include research projects that directly involve OCLC libraries and users. And those are the ones that I think we all think about and are so aware of. Dr. Connaway earned her PhD in Library and Information Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a school that also awarded her the 2020 Distinguished Alumni Award. She has a Master of Science degree from the University of Arizona and a Bachelor of Science degree in Library Science from Edinburgh State University. With that, welcome, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Mary Jo, for that introduction and for being interested in our work here at OCLC. And so it's my pleasure to be with you today. And I'm going to talk about a study that we did, and it's called Redefining the Library Experience. Next slide, please. And this study was based on a previous study, and that study was the New Model Library study. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, that's where this briefing is that I'll be talking about today. So with that, we interviewed 29 library leaders, and they were from an international perspective. They were also from public, academic, and special libraries. And we interviewed them during the pandemic. And we did not want to know so much about what was going on and what they were doing during the pandemic, because we had found that information online. So we did some pre-investigation. So we found out if the library was open, if it was closed, and then reopened. We found out if they were circulating material. So we knew a lot about the libraries that these leaders were managing prior to the interviews. What we wanted to know was their vision for the future, from what they learned during this pandemic, some changes they made, and how they wanted to move forward, thinking about their strategic plans and goals. When we interviewed them, we then analyzed the data, and we coded the data first. And what we saw were 3 major themes. And the 3 themes fell under work experiences, collections experiences, and engagement experiences. Next slide, please. And then we also identified 4 areas of impact. So all of this information emerged from these interviews. And the interviews lasted anywhere from 45 to 60 or more minutes. We thought 45, but they really went longer than that. And so the first thing that we found that kept coming up across these 3 experiences was agility. And that taking this quick, innovative action in response to these changing circumstances. And what we heard is the circumstances could change by the hour, not by the day, but by the hour. Also collaboration, working with different stakeholders. And it was basically to lead change within libraries, institutions, and communities. So the importance of collaboration with other library staff, community agencies, consortia, regional library groups and associations, and other campus departments really came out. Collaborating with faculty, helping them develop courses, support materials for online learning, teaching and learning, also assisting researchers in describing and making data sets available. And also there was this collaboration for this dependency on emergency collections, or these shared print or shared digital consortial collections, and virtualization. And that was this enhancement of the library's presence in this virtual environment. And this growth of digital materials and the new ways of handling physical materials. So we heard different ways of delivering physical materials. And, some were, you would just meet someone outside of the library. Some would say they would deliver the materials to a home or office. There was one that it was a school library in Virginia, and they would actually send the materials to the students, and this was an elementary school, via drone. And so the students were very excited because they were able to get these physical materials, but they also got to have a drone come to their home and deliver them. And so these were all things that we heard. Space was another big issue. And it kept coming up because the space, as we know, libraries are often in these areas that are, high real estate. And so some of the leaders were concerned that, those who fund us will say, oh, we need this space for something else. You've done everything virtually. So, we're going to take this space away. And so they really had to think of ways to continue to use this space creatively, so that the library was sort of this knowledge center, or we heard a lot about community hub. Next slide, please. And then based on our interviews, we also heard from the work experiences, this training for the future. And, this was formal and informal learning, and that we heard it skyrocketed. Why? Because staff had to adapt to new work environments. Some of them had to job share, and there were new service delivery models. And it highlighted, the pandemic highlighted the limitations of some of our traditional siloed modes of operation, and also our models of our organizational models. And so the new library models in these leaders' mind would include staff with versatile skill sets so that the staff could move with agility. So agility comes up here, between different tasks as the situation demands. And so that meant that leaders would need to dedicate and protect the time and resources needed for the staff's professional development and well-being, despite some budget constraints and demanding workloads. Also, focus on the staff's well-being came up. And what does this mean? This means that these shared experiences of stress and uncertainty were emphasized in the work environment. And so within the new model libraries, you'll see places for the staff to be more socially connected and with their colleagues, and also that their staff well-being is more valued. And there were, we heard about these frequent and clear and compassionate communications and transparency with decision-making. Embracing work flexibility. That meant that some individuals and many had to work remotely. And that was the norm for some areas and some libraries and some actual positions. And what happened is that people started to expect to have some remote work, some flexible hours. So all of these things came up during the pandemic, but then individuals wanted to keep that. And also there was this challenge to traditional divisions of labor. And so the pandemic forced people out of their typical work roles. And some individuals had to move within other departments. Some had to move outside of the library completely. We heard that some staff were working at food banks. So these were library staff moving into food banks and helping with creating these baskets for individuals. And they not only put food in them, but also reading materials. And so the jobs really changed. Next slide, please. With the collections experiences, we heard about how there was this need to acquire digital and open content strategically. So what we heard was we were creating these collections, but not with any strategy behind it. And so it became evident that there needed to be a definite strategy for building these open and digital collections. Also, there had to be new ways of connecting to physical collections. And again, this came up with the circulating materials, this contact delivery, the contactless delivery, a lot of grab and go readers advisory, having staff making these resources available outside of the library. So maybe in train stations, different community hubs, rec centers. So these things all came out of the pandemic and we're seeing them now. However, we also heard about prioritizing resources that close the digital divide. We know that the digital divide was present. However, during the pandemic, it really brought this to the forefront. And we heard different stories about individuals who had no access to broadband or the internet. And it wasn't just in rural areas. We heard some faculty did not have access to the internet at home or have their own laptops at home. So we also heard from a librarian in Pakistan who said that on a Friday, the students had to leave campus. And so everything was done online. However, they did not hear from many students. Why? These students were in areas where they had no broadband. And so they had to then get all of their resources, their learning modules onto USB drives and to mail them to the students so that the students could complete their coursework. And this really made the leaders think about how we'll move forward in the future, because this wasn't just something that appeared during the pandemic, but continually is present in our everyday lives. Next slide, please. With the engagement experiences, we came up with this term, partner with a purpose. And we heard that there was a lot of partnership going on and collaboration prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, that changed and partnerships changed. And then there were often multiple partnerships. And what we heard is you shouldn't just partner to partner. There should be some end goal. And what does this bring not only to the library, but to the other agency or academic department who we are partnering with? And then also there was this really important thought that came out of this was this hybrid approach. not everyone wants everything virtually, and some people do not have the capacity to attend events or even to get resources in the physical library. And so there's this need to balance, again, this balance between the virtual and the in-person. And then again, wanting to save these physical spaces, there was a lot of talk about creating spaces for the community to engage. And so, and also, we heard about maker spaces and different ways of bringing individuals in. So here we have these 29 interviews with library leaders. So then we took the information we got from this work and developed an online survey. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about next. Next slide. And so this was called Redefining the Library Experience. And I'm going to explain the survey results. Next screen, please. So this survey was disseminated from January 9th through March 20th of 2023. And this was the first year that we offered the survey through the OCLC Global Council that now is called the Leadership Council. And this one was offered in multiple languages. So we had English, International French, International Spanish, Dutch, German, or Italian. So the respondents were able to select the language that they preferred. There were a total of 1,627 responses from 77 countries and territories. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can see the breakdown in this slide. And so the Americas are pretty obvious. That is North and South America, North, South, Central America. EMEA is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And the Asia Pacific are the countries and territories in those regions. Next slide, please. So what did we want to know? Many things. We wanted to know the current offerings and then future expectations for ways of delivering physical materials, electronic ways of delivering materials, in-person library services, online library services, technology offerings for library users. Next screen. Local, state, and government agencies who the libraries are partnering with, local nonprofit organizations, local for-profit organizations, local universities, colleges, and schools, and library consortia who libraries are partnering with. Next screen. We also wanted to know current staffing and future expectations for staff members' area of focus, so their areas of expertise, staff members' level of education, the support for staff well-being, staff engagement with the community, and staff use of technology. And next slide, please. So for library offerings, next slide, we asked, how will experiences related to library resources and services change in the next 10 years? This is a quote from an academic library respondent in Australia. Less print, more collaborative spaces. They also do not need to be high tech, but they need to be flexible, adaptable spaces where users can use their own technology, discuss, plan, etc. So again, it's this place of engagement. Next screen, please. So we also came up in the new model library with space as a service. And what we learned that libraries will increasingly play the role of space providers. And you can see on this slide that 59% of the respondents expect collaborative meeting spaces to increase. So that's a total of 1,239 respondents. And I don't know why, but it looks like the writing, the text is covered here. But the academic libraries said this 66% of the time. The public libraries were 55% of the time. You can see the ends. And other libraries were 42% of the time. And there are several quotes on the side, but for lack of time, I won't read them, but you can read them. You can see they're a public library director from Greece and an academic librarian in Italy. And they really talk about this need for space. Next slide, please. Then we asked about, and I'm sorry about the spacing, it looked fine, but now I think when we display, the different systems display differently. And you can see that for one of the important things with academic libraries was this whole open science, open research. And that's the focus for the near future for academic libraries. So 2 out of 3 academic library respondents expect this need to increase. And you can see a quote also from a US university librarian. And so you see that the services, and again, these figures are not displaying well, but 67% said that online services supporting open science, open research was where the focus would be. 66% said this in-person services supporting open science, open research would be their focus in the near future. Staff technology used for open science, open research was 63%, and staff focused on open science, open research was 55%. So those are pretty high numbers. Next slide, please. Now for public libraries, device and creation services came up. So half of public library respondents expect circulation, rental, and collection maker spaces to increase. So this device, circulation, rental, and maker spaces to increase in public libraries. 52% said that the device circulation rental would increase. And 47% said that this need for maker spaces, creation spaces, fabrication services would increase. Next slide. Where this is going now into library engagement and collaboration. Next slide. So respondents were asked how many consortia cooperative buying clubs that their library is a member of. The not sure responses were removed from this baseline. And so the end was 901 for this. And you will see that 49% belong to at least one consortia, 29%, 3 to 5. 4%, 6 to 10, and 4% belong to more than 10. And so this means that 86% of these respondents, these 901 respondents, belong to at least one consortia. And the respondents who belong to at least one consortia were presented with 5 services that libraries may receive from consortia and cooperatives or buying clubs. And they were asked how they anticipate these services would change in the next 5 to 10 years. And so the vast majority of the respondents expect the following services from consortia, cooperatives, and buying clubs to either increase or remain the same. And if you go to the next slide, we can see some figures here on, again, not sure responses were removed from this. So our total for belonging to at least one consortia were 748 respondents. And you'll see that they believe that, you'll see that they belong to these resource sharing for physical and or electronic resources. Also, this they receive this, they're all part of this buying club. So we have buying power in groups. Also, staff training development resources came from these from these consortia. And the technology infrastructures, 71% of them say that. And shared catalog. Again, I'm sorry about the way these are displaying, but hopefully you can see that this shared cataloging was 73%. Next screen, please. So they expected the resource sharing, the consortia, to increase. And again, you'll see that 59% of these respondents, so the total was 748, believe that resource sharing through consortia will increase. What I found really interesting is that the other libraries, they're leading this with 62%. So those special libraries, and so that can include archives, museums, government. Those see that this resource sharing will increase in the future. Academics follow very closely, and then public libraries. And you can see the quote from a U.S. librarian in a government library. Again, saying that the part of the shared catalog and shared physical collections are important to them. Next screen, please. So public libraries talked about partnering with nonprofits and government agencies. And nearly half of the public libraries expect this to increase in the next 5 to 10 years. So 48%. And then they see this partnering with nonprofit services in the community. So that can be social services. It can be the agencies for environmental agencies. Then they also, 47% believe that there will be an increase in partnering with other governmental agencies that serve their communities. And again, you'll see these quotes on from different library staff. And in Italy, there was a government librarian who talks about baskets of books that they loaned for schools and summer camps. And a Canadian public librarian said that, you know, they work with community groups as well as public schools, daycares, health centers. And this individual really hopes that this will continue to increase. So the breadth of the library's reach is increasing and is expected to increase for public libraries. Next slide, please. So this section is about the library as a workplace. Next slide. So across the board, across a broad set of collections about the library as workplace, included questions about training, skilling up, staff use of technologies. From all of these, there were 2 takeaways that we really want to highlight. And the first is the indication that survey respondents expect flexible working options to increase. Some indicated it's here now. Others said it's going to come in the next 5 to 10 years. This varied by region. The second was this access to mental health care for staff. 30% of the survey respondents indicated that they expected to stay the same, or staying the same was reported higher than an increasing or decreasing. So again, there are regional differences, and you can tell here from there's a quote from a special librarian in France that they experience access to these services now, compared to some colleagues in other regions within the US. And next slide, please. They also expect the use of staff technology to increase, and that didn't really surprise me. Data-related technologies were expected to increase for academics, and for publics, it's marketing and communications technology. That surprised me a bit. And again, you'll see that 60% of the academic librarians say technology for data management and curation would increase, 60% for technology for data analytics and visualization, and 55% for technology for collection analysis. For public libraries, 62% for marketing and communications, 53% for collection analysis, 52% for technology for data analytics, and 50% for technology for event management, which I also thought was interesting because we talk about this, but the public library respondents think that this is really going to increase. Next slide, please. We asked about staff areas of specialty or focus, so their expertise. And there's a belief that there will be an increase of staff that are focused on user experience. And that is very dear to my heart. When I read this, I thought this was great because I've spent a lot of my career studying users or prospective users of libraries. And for the academic library respondents, again, they believe that staff focused on data and research are also expected to increase. And so that these are things that when you're thinking about hiring, you may be looking in these different areas, or if you are thinking yourself of specializing, continuing your education, or specializing in any area, if you are a current student, these are things you probably want to consider. And again, that user perspective is extremely important because we are here for those users in our communities. Next screen, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the library visions for the future that we heard from our respondents to this survey. Next slide, please. So this was no surprise to me that 37% of our respondents said they would like the library in 10 years as a trusted information source. 31% said as a flexible space. 22% said as a gathering hub, and 11% as agile and open. And I really think that, all of this, I think, in my opinion, breaks down to communication, relationship building, and knowing what your community needs and expects from the library. Next screen. These are just some quotes that we heard, that we pulled from the responses, because we did have open-ended. We always provided open-ended responses, and we got these different quotes from different individuals. So you'll see from a public library director in Spain, they see it as this lifelong learning center, and where they want this creation. So that's where we hear about these flexible spaces and spaces, maker spaces. And then from an academic library assistant director in Canada, welcoming space, cutting edge of technology. A public library director in Canada, the go-to place in the community, whether it's online or in person. So creating both of these welcoming spaces in a virtual and a physical environment. And this community hub, we heard that a lot. And again, that's from an academic library assistant director in Canada. Next slide, please. Again, I believe that I was asked, I wrote a chapter in a book called Library 2035. And I believe from doing this research and listening to many of our colleagues that we are really dependent upon building relationships and being adaptable. And these relationships have to be global now. We are a global society. And so I really think we need to be moving in that direction. Next slide, please. If you've ever heard me speak, you've probably seen this quote before. It's by Brian Matthews. I should be his PR director. It was written, it was a white paper written in 2012, and it's called Think Like a Startup. But I love so much of what he says. And basically, if we focus on relationship building instead of service excellence, we can uncover new needs and be in a position to make a stronger impact within our communities. And we're often, especially now, asked to articulate our impact. And I really think that you can't do that without this relationship building. And in this same white paper, he Matthews talks about, you know, the fear of failure. So I had the privilege, I'm going to say, of working in a startup, and a startup that was one of the first companies to provide electronic books. And, you know, I left an academic position and went to this startup, and everyone thought I was a madwoman. And I may have been. But you know what? It was the most exciting position because we weren't afraid to try new things. We took risks. Did we fail with some of these? Yes, we did. But did we learn from them and share that with others so that now, look, we have electronic books. They're not new anymore. They're not novel. But you have to be willing to take that risk. And yes, you may fail. When we hire new team members on the research team or have new research assistants come in, and when things don't work, and I will tell you, things often do not work, they will often say, oh, we failed. What are we going to do? Say, no, we did not fail. We learned. And what we're going to do is we're going to document that. We're going to learn from that. We are not going to do this again. And we're going to tell others about this so that they don't do what we've done. And so, again, it's really important to be able to communicate, to be able to try new things, and to be flexible and a risk taker. Next slide, please. This is a quote, and again, I am so sorry about these slides because I reviewed them, and I think it's something about the way they're displaying from the ratio, but hopefully you can still read them. But this is a quote from a colleague of mine, David Lanke's, and again, he's talking about knowledge is created through conversation. So if you're in the knowledge business, you are in the conversation business. Again, this is that communication, relationship building, partnership, collaboration, all of those things that came out of these studies that I just talked about. And, you know, this is where the library's outcomes become really critical. And we need to, when we're trying to articulate the value of libraries to our communities, it's all about telling a story. and about how we partnership and how to bring these lived experiences of how we change the how we change the way individuals in our communities lives. And so we need these individuals in our communities to help us tell this story. Next slide, please. And so this is from my chapter in Library 2035. I really think that the future is not being afraid to change, not being afraid to try new ways of working, and new ways of hiring, promoting individuals, training, caring for staff, developing new approaches for teaching and learning information literacy skills. Right now with AI, I mean, AI is in our lives every day and many things that we do. But do we really know what that means? Do our communities know? This is a great area for us to embrace and integrate into our information literacy education and skills. Thinking of new ways of providing space. We are hearing about providing space outside of the library. Now, maybe if you're living in Wisconsin in the winter, you don't want to do that. But thinking of other places that you can do outdoor spaces or outdoor spaces in the spring, summer, and fall. There are ways of thinking creatively, being in your community centers. I tell the story about a public library in the community where I live in Colorado. We have different branches, and in the one town, the branch was in an old school. I didn't like going there. I would go out of my way to go to a different branch. And the library director was astute enough to she was very involved within the community, and there was going to be a new recreation center in this little town. And so she got involved, and guess what? The library is in that rec center. And now I go to that library because there's the library across from the pool and the floating river. And it's just so exciting to see people of all ages in that library. There's a fireplace for the winter. There's this wonderful room with murals of the solar system for the children. And it's bustling, and I love going there. And I see people because they're at their yoga class or they're walking the track. So it's that thinking differently. When she first told me that, I said, "Are you sure you want to take this on?" And she said, "Yes, this will be one of the best things we do." And it was. And so we need to really think creatively. And also, I believe that library staff and leaders are going to be more actively involved in sustainability and climate change initiatives at the local, regional, and global levels. But again, none of this is relevant if this isn't centered on the needs of our communities. And if we fail to cultivate relationships at this broader global level. And so the last slide, well, I think we have time to open it up. We have 8 minutes for discussion and questions. And I should have a reference slide at the end as well, if you are interested in some of the studies that I have mentioned.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was excellent. And I should mention that these slides are available for everybody to download, and there shouldn't be any formatting problems. But I will also say that that presentation was so excellent and well explained that there was no problem with those slides. We all understood everything, and it was fabulous. So I'm going to open it up to questions right now. Does anybody have one to kick things off with? I'd like to ask you, if I may, from I'm from an academic library, but you can speak to it from any point. Relationship building that isn't around service excellence. How do you see that playing out in libraries, or particularly maybe academic libraries? Do you have any suggestions for us?
Well, I think you need to be involved, not just in your academic community, but in your local regional community. One of the library leaders who we interviewed said that it was a requirement for the library managers to be a member of some local community like committee, task force, or work with some local community agency. Now, you may be restricted by employment laws within your region, but if you aren't, that's a really good way. Or even if you don't require it, encourage it. Give individuals the time to do that. Also, be where your students and faculty are, I mean, physically as well as virtually. So, if they're in, Snapchat or any of the social media, Instagram, be there. Be in the student union or wherever they congregate. A great example for the public library is, in the rec center. I know they have athletic centers on campus. You can't start a library there, but you can have a presence there. And I think that's really important. I'm doing a workshop next week, and one of the things that I'm having, it's in person, that I'm having the attendees do that they don't know about, is to take time and walk around the campus and observe. You should be observing all of the time, and see how people are using not just spaces in the library, but spaces on campus or the coffee shops near the campus, and figure out how you can be a part of that. And you may not have this luxury, and I call it a luxury. I thought this was wonderful. One academic librarian enrolled in a class as a student and did not disclose her identity to the students. And so she was in the class for a semester doing the work with the students. And she was there as a student, but also helping, when you do your group assignments. So she was also teaching. And at the end of the semester, the students said, what class are you taking next semester? Let's all get in the same classes. And then she disclosed she was a librarian. And she said it was great because they started coming into the library. They referred their friends. And not even if they came in, they would contact her virtually. She said that it was, just a really great experience, because then she could also tailor some of the offerings in the library to the way these students are learning.
That is wonderful. And I think we have time for one more question, if that's okay. We have a question from Karen Harker, which is, what are some ways of measuring success of relationship building?
And that's a hard one. That's interesting, because we're asked as a research team to measure our impact, and that's hard because you can say citations or but just because someone cites you, it may not be a positive thing. They may be refuting what you're saying, but with the relationship building, I think it comes out in multiple ways. And I think the individuals who you've built relationships will be the promoters of the library, the supporters of the library, your champions. And I think that's one way of really measuring it. try to take something away from the faculty. Okay. And if you have a relationship with them, they will be very vocal. Do that with students as well. They will be vocal. And so they are your champions. That's your impact. They are letting the funders, the administrators know that this isn't okay. And one of the things that I've learned from some colleagues in leadership positions is that when they build these relationships, they have like these lived experiences from individuals of how the library has helped to change their lives in some way. And either the leaders tell these stories, or they give these community members the opportunity to tell their stories, either on something on the websites and some collateral, or with the boards, the library boards, or your mayor, or your library, or your community officials. So again, use these individuals who you have these relationships with to be your champions and to tell your story.
Thank you so much. I'm very cognizant of your time, Lynn, and how you have generously donated it today. We have learned a lot. I will address one question in the chat, which asks if you break down in your survey, do you break down regions, the 3 regions, results in each region?
We have done that, and I had presented last year in Montreal with my colleague Daniel Bovin, and we presented the Canadian results, and he presented them in French, and that should be available online as well. And then with my Spanish colleagues in March, we presented the European results. We cannot break down by individual territories or countries because we don't have enough responses from some that it really doesn't make sense. But yes, we have done that, and they are available online.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I do know that we are at noon and you need to go somewhere else, I believe. So we would like to thank you very much for your time and for this wonderful presentation. It's been great. We're going to load it so that other members in our community can enjoy it and learn from it too. So thank you very, very much.
All right. Thanks for the invitation. Bye.
Goodbye, Lynn.
Justine, I'm going to go into the backstage.
Okay, I will
And
too.
I'm going to stop the webinar.